Hey, this is Micah from This Divided World. And this is the face-to-face video number 6. And I'm going to try and answer two really important, really relevant questions. The first is, should Christians listen to secular music? And the second is, should Christians support secular bands? And this is probably going to be the longest face-to-face that I'm going to do. And it'll probably be a little bit out of order and stuff like that, just because it's such a big thing and I have so many thoughts on it. And hopefully I get to all my stuff. It's kind of just, I'm kind of just going to be shooting from the hip here. You know, I've thought about this and discussed this with people and at length talked to people about it, but this is really, I'm realizing how important it is to discuss this. Because just this past week, I've gotten 2 separate messages from people on this, and they're wondering. And over the course of this ban, I've gotten tons of different comments, messages. People say, hey, you know, we see that you post to go check out this band, and then I go to it, and I find that it's not a Christian band. And I definitely think that's like, some people are disappointed by that, and some people are glad that we support secular bands. But in any case, none of that matters. Just want you to hear out what I have to say about this. And, you know, there's definitely the very real possibility that everything that I could say could be just my opinion and could be totally wrong. And so you have to take that into account. You have to take into account that I want this to be what I believe God has spoken to me about this, and that this is a spiritual opinion, but you have to look into the very real possibility that I could just be none of what I'm saying could be right. So in any case, I don't think that's what it is, but just take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. So those are 2 really huge questions. Basically, I'll give a little bit of backstory about this. One really huge reason why I wanted to start this band, This Divided World, is because I really love deathcore music, like just brutally heavy. You got these fast parts of death metal, and then these, like, the breakdowns from more like hardcore and metalcore kind of stuff. And I got to a place where I was an atheist, and I was listening to that music, and then I got saved. I became a Christian, and I still love that music, the emotion in it and stuff like that. And so, you know, the inevitable question comes, like, is it okay for me to listen to this? Because I know this band that I'm listening to is not Christian, doesn't have the same belief, and these lyrics that are in here are not glorifying to God. And so, for example, the day that there was a day in my life, like a specific time, I was listening to, I love the format and like song structure and the riffs and the drum parts in the song Unanswered by Suicide Silence. And if you are a Suicide Silence fan, you know those lyrics, and you know that's the opposite of glorifying to God. And if you're not, basically Unanswered, it's the vocalist talking about how all these prayers go unanswered. What about them? And he's saying that that's proof that there's not an existence of God. And so for me, I would just listen to this music. I love for me, I'm not a vocalist, so I don't really like love the lyrics as much, I guess you could say. I like the heart of music sometimes, like when I'm listening to Sleeping Giant, stuff like that. Like, I don't listen to lyrics specifically, but I know that it's a good heart of that music. And so, but I knew the heart of Unanswered was like evil or opposed to what I believed. And so I knew that, and I thought, this is fine, I can listen to this. And then I realized one day that I was repeating these lyrics. And so, basically, this is kind of my thought on, or a little bit more further into my thought on listening to secular music. And even as far as to saying, like, satanic music, or, you know, all the spectrum of, it can be anything, but we're kind of specifically talking about metal. And so I think a relevant story is in the Bible when Jesus is talking about, like, somebody said something to him about how his disciples don't wash their hands before eating, or I don't know, it might be confusing stuff, but he talks about how it's not what goes into a man that defiles him, but it's what comes out of a man. And I think that's kind of one of my points for listening to secular music, is I realized that it wasn't just, there's something in music that's emotional, and it's, I would say, spiritual. I believe the intention of music was for worship with God. And so I think music for entertainment is okay, but that song at that point had not just been, oh, it's just this musical thing and these notes put together and this sound. It had become something where I recognized that it was a spiritual thing. And for me, to this day, I still can't listen to that song. As much as I love the breakdowns on it and the riffs and the song structure and everything, for me personally, I can't listen to that song. And so that's not to say that I don't listen to other secular music, but what that song means to me, that I know what the lyrics are, and when I listen to that song, it gets into my head and gets into my spirit. I can't listen to that song anymore. And I know that about myself. But one of the cool things about metal for me, because I'm not a vocalist, I don't pick up on lyrics right away. So I've listened to songs like for years that I have no clue what the vocalist is saying. And to me that works to my advantage, because I know that the lyrics aren't glorifying to God, but still, for what that song means to me, I can just make it whatever I want, and I can just listen to it and just appreciate the musicianship to that song and to that music, and not feel like it's affecting me spiritually. And maybe I should have said this before, but I think about how critical people are of Christians listening to secular music. And for a long time, I gotta admit, I didn't listen to anything but Christian music. And then it kind of got to a point where I wanted to have more like metal influences. I mean, there's only so many really, really heavy Christian metal bands. So I started getting back into this, and I think something that puts this whole situation or whole conversation into context is asking, like, if you were asking, like, let's say you're going to a restaurant, would you ask if the owner was like a Christian, or would you refuse to eat from there if the cook that made it wasn't a Christian? And of course you wouldn't, or most anybody I know wouldn't say like that. But so we get these things, whatever it is. I just bought contact solution at Walmart. I didn't ask if the cashier that was selling it to me was a Christian. I didn't ask if the company that made it had Christian values. I didn't ask if Walmart has Christian values or was trying to live for Jesus or glorify God with their company or anything like that. And so there's this disconnect, and I think it comes back to what I was saying about that song Unanswered by Suicide Silence, is that there's a difference between music and these other things in our lives where we separate the two. And for me, it's that music has a way of getting into our spirit. Like I was saying, Jesus talks about that it's what comes out of us. It's what's from a man's heart, what's from our spirit that matters. So anyways, that's kind of my little thought on that. And the other side of that, which I definitely don't want to neglect to say. So basically at this point, what it seems like I'm saying is that it's okay to listen to secular music. But the flip side of that coin is that it might not be. Because I think it's in the book of Romans, there's a few different passages, and basically I'm going to kind of sum it all up. But there's different, there was meat that was offered to idols and then sold in the markets, and they were asking if it was okay to eat this meat. And was it Paul? I don't remember. Paul was saying basically that it's okay because for you, those gods that they sacrificed it to or whatever, when they killed it, those gods don't exist. There's only one God. But if somebody believes, if somebody else saw you eat that, and for them to think that you were eating it even though you knew that it was sacrificed to that God, I don't know if that made any sense. But for their conscience sake, you are not supposed to eat that meat. And also, there's other things in Romans where it talks about not causing a brother to stumble. So what I get from all that, and also about becoming all things to all men, that I might win some, and I think it even goes along with not even winning somebody's soul, but keeping having somebody's salvation, is that it might be okay for you to listen to that secular music if it doesn't get into your spirit and doesn't mess up your walk with God, but it might not be okay for you. Like, for example, if you, before you were saved, listened to this music and like, let's say Unanswered, for example, that song by Suicide Silence, and you sang that song every day, and it was like your anthem or something like that about how much you hated God or how you didn't believe in God or whatever, and then you get saved, you might not be able to listen to that song without that song meaning to you what it meant to you at that time. And so it might not be okay for you to listen to secular music. And that might be a tough pill to swallow, but I guarantee that you'll be better off to follow the will of God. Because some days I'll want to go in and listen to a secular band, and God specifically speaks to me not to listen to it. And sometimes being the disobedient, sinful, self-centered person that I am, I choose to listen to that anyways. But I know in that moment that what I'm choosing to do is wrong. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be wrong, and it's not necessarily wrong, but it might be. So for you, it might just be a song, or maybe a certain band, but it might be all, like, you might have to give up all secular metal completely, or even all secular music. And you have to be willing to give that up. Like, I can't tell you whether it's right or wrong for you to listen to non-Christian metal or non-Christian, just music in general, because I feel like that's such a personal thing, and it's like, it's not like the 10 Commandments where it's like, you shall not murder. Like, okay, that's obvious, and that's something that's been stated and that is the same. But there's differences in our individual walks with God, that something might not necessarily be sin, looking at it on surface level, but for you it might be. Or for me, it might be. Like, for example, like something as simple as drinking coffee. At a certain point in my life, it was a sin for me to drink coffee. And without going too much into it or whatever, basically, maybe you deal with addictions, and God told you, maybe God freed you from addictions, and then in small ways, you started working back into living those addictions, then it wouldn't be right for you, because maybe that was a starting place for something else. So, in any case, those are the two sides to that. I think I'm gonna stop here and try and, I ended up going a lot longer than I thought I was going to, but I'm gonna do a face-to-face video number 6, part 2, where I'm gonna talk about whether or not Christians should support secular bands. So that part 2 will be coming up right in a minute.